Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I'm sitting in the Skeeter in the garage right now. We've got a cold, windy day outside, so you might hear it kind of blowing on the outside of the building. But I wanted to come into the garage and do a little bit of work on the Skeeter. A couple of things that I'm doing just in terms of looking at my maps for the next event on Lake Norfolk down in Arkansas. But before I got to that, I also wanted to do a little bit of a little waypoint organization. This is something that I like to do after each tournament just to make sure that I'm retaining the information that I found, and at the same time just making sure that everything's organized and that my graphs are not bogged down with too many waypoints. It's really one of the great features with the Lowrance units. And I've showed you guys how to do this before, but I figured I'd do it and kind of point out a couple of the things that I like with respect to these graphs. And then we might take a quick peek at Lake Norfolk as well, just to get an idea as to what we're looking at, because I have not actually looked at that lake before. Don't know much about it at all, never fished it. I know where it's at, but that's about it. So let's just jump right over. I'm gonna turn you guys around, and I got my graphs, both Lowrance units on. So I'm just I want to point out a couple of things first, I guess. So if I zoom in, this is Kentucky and Barkley Lakes. You can see these are my waypoints. We've launched down here by Paris, and I fished pretty much all the way up to almost up to the moors. That was kind of the range that I was fishing. So a couple of things I want to point out though. You know, if I zoom in, so let's just find a section of this lake. This is just the normal mapping. And one thing to point out with Kentucky Lake is it was at winter pool, so it was like 5 feet low. Any of these bars, really anywhere outside of the main channel, which is the dark blue, was really kind of sketchy in terms of what to run. So just zooming in this section, if you weren't paying attention to where you were at, you were definitely in some areas that were sketchy. And what I mean by that is I'm going to switch over to my color palette. This is just the standard shading, but remember the water was 5 feet low. And in this case, if I go down here to add my chart options, and then I can scroll down, I go to shading. So I've already made a depth palette. So actually, why don't I show you, let's turn on the custom mode and I can show you what I did. So the first range, 0 to 10 feet, I made red. So I'm just gonna scroll out. 0 to 10 feet, I made red. 0 to 14 feet, I made orange. I shouldn't say 0 to 14, sorry. 10-foot range, anything less than 10 foot or water, I made red. And the reason for that was the water was 5 feet low from this map. So really I'm looking at the 5 feet of water not even having water. And then because there's so many stumps and potential high spots, I wanted anything that was in what was actually 5 feet of water or less to really jump out, because that was potentially very dangerous in terms of running around. From 10 to 14 feet, which is actually more of like, I'm gonna say 6 to 10 foot of water, I made orange. And then from like 10 to what is actually 17, I made kind of this yellow color. And you can see, you know, those are just the colors as I came down. Now I'm not looking to show you each color, but basically what I want to point out is even though this graph was set at 10 foot of water, the water, or it's looking at it from a summer pool level, these levels really were shallower. So the red was, I'm going to say about 0 to 6 feet is actually probably what it was, 0 to 5 feet, and then a little bit more. So I wanted that color to jump out. And if I jump out of this doesn't look that bad in terms of running. If I turn that depth shading on though, by hitting depth palette 1, look at how sketchy that is. All of that red, all of the dark red is going to be probably 5 or 6 feet of water or less. And then the orange, and the orange and the lighter color orange was really water that was, I'm gonna say, 10 foot of water or less. And remember, you got stumps and stuff floating around. So anytime we were running outside of that main channel, if you wanted to go up this side, this was super, super shallow. So it was really important just to figure out like how you could get from the west side to the east side without hitting anything. And yes, there were some areas where you had running lanes that helped, but in a lot of instances we didn't have that. So, you know, there were areas where I was bouncing back and forth where I could run the ditches. I'm just trying to find it. An example. Here's an example. So like I was just trying to get to the other side, but the only way to get across this bar was to come through some of these ditches. And if I didn't have my shading on, it was really difficult to see where I'm going. But with the shading, it made it really easy to tell where I was at. So that's the first thing. Now, what I will tell you is I need to change this for when I go to Lake Norfolk. Sorry, I accidentally stopped the video. What I was saying is I need to change the actual depth palette so that when I go to Lake Norfolk, it's going to be different because there is a lot deeper. And here I really wanted to stand out, say that 15 foot of water or less. So that was the first thing. The next thing I like to do, if I come to my other graph, is actually save my waypoints and do a little waypoint management. So again, here you can see Kentucky Lake. This is the region of all my waypoints. Now, because I've never fished Kentucky Lake this time of year, I didn't even import my other waypoints onto Kentucky Lake. So these are all new waypoints for Kentucky Lake from the last week. Now I want to save these. One of the greatest things about the Lowrance units is if you can save by lake, by region, and in this case, you come down here to storage, you go up here to waypoints, and what I want to do is export an entire region, in this case, Kentucky Lake. And I'm just going to grab my box here and highlight the whole lake. Now, I actually don't need to do the whole lake. I'm only saving these waypoints in this region, but I'm going to export it, export. Now, I've got my memory card on the bottom slot, so that's the one we want to highlight. Hit OK. And now these are all the lakes I've already got on that card. Now I just want to come down here and find Kentucky Lake, which I've already saved in the past. Select Kentucky Lake, and it's saving those waypoints to my Kentucky Lake file just like that. All done. Now I also want to do Sam Rayburn. I did not do this for Sam Rayburn after I fished that last tournament. So if I come down to Sam Rayburn, you can see I got waypoints all over this lake. I want to save that to my file as well. So in this case, I'm going to come back down here to storage, hit the waypoints, export region, grab my box, and save all of that section for Sam Rayburn, export, export to that bottom memory slot card, hit OK, and now I'll just have to come find Sam Rayburn, which I've got right there. So Rayburn, select it, and it just saved all of those waypoints to the chip card as well. And then if I want to download those waypoints, or when I go to a lake, if I wanted to go to, say, Toledo Bend, I could just import all of my Toledo Bend waypoints. So we've got that. And then while I'm down here, you know, I've got everything saved. I also wanted to take a quick peek at Lake Norfolk because I've never been there. I feel like I kind of know what to expect. You can see it's right here, northern part of Arkansas. It actually looks like it goes up into Missouri too, which I did not know. So if you want to come up here, you probably need a license for that. But this is going to be a typical Ozark Highland impoundment. You know, the lower end is going to be your deepest area. Now in this case, you can see, you know, using the setting that we had, it may not actually be a bad thing when I say the setting for my depth palette. So if I take the depth palette off, it's somewhat overwhelming. If I turn that depth palette just from Kentucky Lake on, it really will help point out some of my shallower areas. And depending on what the fish are doing, I might change those shades to either really pinpoint some of these shallower regions or really try to pinpoint maybe some of these main lake points. In either case right now, all of the water that's probably deeper than 40 feet is going to be this dark blue, which on a lake like this, I may be fishing 60 or 70 foot of water. So I can change the palette based on what I'm looking for, but it's going to be an interesting derby. I think all three species of bass can be a player. I think your spots and your smallmouth probably closer to the dam, your largemouth a little up the creek arms. If we've got cold weather, you're probably going to be looking more for some of your wintering, pre-spawn staging places. You know, a lot of these channel swing banks like here, channel swing bank here, channel swing bank here, here, like just places where the creek channel comes and clips. You know, if we go further up the river, you can see this stuff shallows out a little bit, but a lot of these channel swing banks are going to be players. If we're a little bit further along and maybe fish are starting to think about spawning, you might start to see some of these, you know, these shallower coves become player. Even some of the stuff that's your main lake flats, like that one area we saw right down here. Like this looks like kind of a classic spotted bass smallmouth area where you've got a bigger, shallower flat, you know, with two defined drains. Bait fish could get pushed up into that. They could spawn on this saddle. That's kind of a classic Ozark style thing. If you got pea gravel in those areas, that could definitely be a player. You know, it's going to be a matter of trying to figure out where these fish are at. You know, coming up into a creek like this looks pretty cool, where you've got a lot of spawning pockets. You've still got, again, you know, a bigger flat area with a couple of defined ditches through those shallower flats. You know, I'm going to really try to break this down and have the areas of the lake that I want to fish really kind of dialed in a little bit more, because I don't want to just go here and be like, oh, I'm going to drive around. I'm really trying to look for some key little things and looking for areas, you know, like trying to break it down where you've got your main lake out here. Are the fish in this region? Are they pushed further back? A lot of times what you'll find, you know, this is kind of a typical Ozark. It's just you have your straight ditch going all the way back. But if you zoom it out on some of these areas, you can probably identify some places that don't necessarily fit that same typical Ozark style like drain. Like a lot of this stuff I would rather fish. I'm just trying to see if anything jumps out here, but a lot of these places you've got like your drain doesn't go all the way back. So this is kind of an example, right? You've got your main creek channel that comes down, but instead of it going all the way to the back, which it obviously does, but you lose that drain kind of like right here. You can see how that drain just kind of flattens out. A lot of times, depending on this time of year or where the fish are at, they could be sitting right there. You know, you've got your deeper drain ends, and then it just kind of becomes more of a flat towards the back. So, you know, this would kind of fall under that same category a little further back. So if they're not all the way back spawning, they could be sitting here would be a good place to look. If they're not there, here would be a good place to look. And then if they're not there, they could be pretty much anywhere all the way out to the main lake. So I'd start looking maybe on some of these points, you know, and some of these main points out by the main lake before it hits the main lake. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. From what I've been told or heard about this place, 12 pounds is a really good bag. And you can do it on all three species of fish. So trying to identify which species, it could be the main factor too. You know, is it the spotted bass that are easier and bigger? Are the smallmouth maybe on beds and the largemouth aren't? So the smallmouth could be potentially easier. Are the largemouth set up in pre-spawn phase where you have a better shot at big females? Like it could be, I think all three of those could be really a factor. And, you know, I guess it's a good thing for the tournament. It's not necessarily a good thing for my season, but I feel very free with respect to approaching this event. You know, I've got 2 tournaments left in this Opens division. I really don't know that at this point I could make the EQ, unfortunately, unless I maybe win these 2 tournaments. But I basically feel like I'm fishing for the win to try to make the Classic. And having said that, I'm going to approach it that way. I'm not worried about catching a limit. I'm going to fish in a manner that I think gives me the ability to catch the winning caliber fish. And on a fishery like this, if 12 pounds truly is a good bag, if you can go out and catch 17 one day and you know, another 14 another day, you'll have a shot going into that last day at the win if you can have another really solid bag. And that's exciting to me. Like at this point, you know, I can't really look at my career and generally say you have that many opportunities unless it's like a championship event. But even in a championship event, there's a lot of money paid out down the road to the point where, you know, you feel like, hey, if I can catch a limit, I can potentially bump myself up into a higher pay range. So even in that case, you don't feel like you have that. In this case, I kind of feel like it's just a one-off tournament at this point, a jackpot tournament. It's like, hey, if you don't cash, no big deal, but you're really fishing for the win. So I'm going to do a lot of map study, try to break it down just because I don't really know much about this lake. Don't even know the names of the creeks or anything like that, but it's exciting to go to a new fishery. So just wanted to point out a couple of things that I like to do after each event, a couple of things I like to do moving forward to a new event. And hopefully you guys found it helpful. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Stay tuned, we'll have a new one for you tomorrow.